Hey guys, welcome back to the 4th episode of the UDT's tutorial where I'm recreating Ghost Recon Wildlands, this drone system that they have in it. So far we've set up a zoom function, we've made it so we can fly around, we've given ourselves night vision, we've made it so we can deploy our drone and go back to our character, and we've made it so that we can roll side to side. So now we're going to set up our rangefinder system that we have. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to drag this down, and we're going to make this come like way out here, because we're going to have a bunch of different things coming out of our event tick later on. So for now I'm going to drag out, and we're just going to make a delay. I'm going to leave this 0.2 so that it's not shooting out too quick. Actually, we'll make that 0.1, because the event tick shoots out a lot quicker than I actually want it to. We're then going to go ahead, we're going to drag out, invest a decent amount of distance. We're going to go line trace for objects. And then we're going to set up this. So to do that, we're going to get our follow camera. We're then going to get our forward location. We're then going to get the forward vector. And then we're going to times that by float. I'm going to set that to 5,000, which should be the max distance of our rangefinder. We're then going to get a plus vector and connect these two together. And then put that into our end and that one into our start. So now what's happening here is we're getting our follow camera, we're getting the world location of it, which is where it exists inside of our game at runtime. And then we're setting that as our starting position, so that's where the beginning of this line trace will start at. And then we're also getting the forward vector, which is the vector in front of the character, and that will always come back as just 1. So we have to times that by 5,000, which sets it to 5,000. And then we will then add that to our world location, and then that will be our endpoint for this line, so that is the maximum amount of distance. So if you want to increase the range of the rangefinder, you can increase this number. If you want to make it smaller, you can decrease this. We're also going to drag out from object types. I'm going to go make array, and then on this array we're going to add a bunch of pins. So we're going to need a total of 6, and I'm just going to add every single option we have here. If you have more, then you'll have to add more, but by default you only have these ones. Drag out a little bit more space. Make everything look a bit neater. There. So what this does is it makes it so that the object types that this thing will return is set to everything. So every single thing in the game, whether it be a destructible or a vehicle or a physics body or a pawn or a world dynamic or a world static, will be something that this line trace can hit so that it can give us our max range, or our range for our rangefinder. So if there's anything you don't want your rangefinder to work on, just make sure it's not one of the options here. And if you want your rangefinder to work on it, make sure this is there. So we're now going to go ahead and we're going to actually make another variable here. So we're going to call this one rangefinder distance. We're going to set this to an integer, and then we're going to leave that 0 by default. We're going to drag that out and set it, giving us some space to work with. Going to go ahead and just move these ones over. Yeah, so our out hit we're going to drag out, we're going to go break. And then from here we're going to get our distance and drag out, and we're going to go ahead and divide that by float. And that is going to be 20. We're then going to get a trincate and then connect them together. So what's happening here is that the result that it gives us isn't in the meters form that we want it, so we're dividing it by 20. And then the trincate, as you can see here, is it just rounds everything down to 0, because we don't want our rangefinder to be giving us a distance of 1.6. We'd rather it be a whole number, so this just rounds everything down to 0. So if it comes back as 1.9 meters, it'll show up as 1. And then we're setting that to our rangefinder distance, which is a variable we use here shortly. So this is actually our rangefinder system set up, but at the moment there's no way for us to visualize it. So we'll have to make a widget blueprint, but first we're going to go ahead and comment on this so that we know what this is later on. I'm going to call this one rangefinder, and I'm just going to extend it so it fits that. There we go. Yeah, so we're going to save that, and we're going to come here and we're going to make a new widget blueprint. So we're going to come under user interface, and then we're going to select widget blueprint. We're going to call it WB for widget blueprint, and then underscore drone HUD. I'm going to go ahead and open that one up. And then to start off with, we're just going to make a basic little text, but later on we will add a lot more things on it so it actually looks like it's supposed to in Ghost Recon Wildlands. So to begin with, we're going to get a text block here. We're going to drag that out. We're going to anchor it to the bottom middle of our screen and reset its positions. I'm then going to make sure it's got size to content text and then set that to 0.5 by 0.5. I'm then going to set its Y position to -160. And then that should be about right. If you want, you can make the font bigger, but I think 24 will be fine. We'll see. We're now going to come to our text here, and we're going to create a binding. So we'll click bind and then create binding. And that'll take us to the screen. So we can give ourselves some space here to work with. Now inside of here, we're going to need to do a couple things. We're going to have to cast to our drone. And we're going to need to get a reference to it. It's going to go get player pawn. Now what this is it gets the player's current pawn that the controller is controlling. So if we were on our third person character, this wouldn't work. But because this will only be getting called on whenever we're on our drone, this works because whenever we're on our drone, our controller is controlling the pawn for it. So now we're going to drag out. We're going to go rangefinder distance. We're going to get that. And then we're going to get a append. We're going to connect A. And then we're going to set B to meters. I'm just going to type M. And then we connect that there again. Okay, so what's happening now is we're getting our rangefinder distance, which will come in as an integer, so it'll always be a whole number. And then we get our append. And what this does is it makes A the first one, which will be our distance. So say, for example, 100. And then it'll make B, just add M to the end of it. Now by doing that, that'll make it show up as 100 Ms or 100 meters. And then we just connect that to our return node here, which will change it to a string so that whenever we have it printed, it'll show up. So we go ahead and save that. We'll give this function a name. We'll call this rangefinder distance. And then once you've done that, you go ahead and compile save. And then we'll go back to our BP drone. And then we're going to come all the way over here. We're going to get a begin play, or your event begin play. And now once you've got that, you can go ahead and drag out. We're going to create widget. And then under the class, we're going to select that. We're going to put WB at drone HUD, which is what we called our drone HUD earlier. We're then going to drag out from the end of it and get a add to viewport. We're going to connect the target to the return value, and we'll compile save, and we'll go to our play screen. We'll press play, and then we'll jump on it. You can see now that when I move around on my character, I don't have the UI, but now that I've switched to my drone, you can see now that as I fly about, I've got my meters up there. You'll notice that as I walk into that wall, it said 2 meters there, and I can't get any closer. Now if I come on into my BP drone here, you can see that my collision box has got the camera in the dead center of it. And because from where our camera is going out to our collisions is 2 meters, that's why you can't get any closer. If you wanted to change that, you could do a couple things, but it's not that big of a deal. You can see there though, it's working on my character, it's working on the stairs, but if I look up at the sky, you'll notice it's set to 0 meters, and that's because there is nothing for the rangefinder to collide to, or that the raycast to collide with. Which is why that it won't work no matter how far you extend that. So that's just a heads up if you were planning on using this for something to look at in the sky. Unless you gave it some kind of collision to hit, it won't work. But as I fly around here and look at different things, you'll notice the rangefinder changes. If I stand still, I'm not moving at all, it stays 102. Okay, so now currently we only have our rangefinder set up for our HUD, so we're going to go ahead and improve upon that. We're going to go ahead and come back into our WB drone HUD. We're going to go back into the designer. And then we're going to go ahead and find an image. And we're going to drag that image in our canvas panel. We're going to select it. And you'll notice at the moment it's just this little white rectangle at the top corner. That's because we haven't added a texture to it. So to do that, we're going to have to go get a texture. I'm going to use one that I've already made on Photoshop. If you want to use the same one that I'm using, there'll be a link below in the description. So you can go ahead and download that and continue following along. But as you can see, it's just this little kind of crosshair thing with a thing on the outside that'll move around. It might look a little weird at the moment, but as I implement stuff to it, you'll see how it looks, and it's actually pretty decent. We're going to go ahead and come back in. We're going to come under the brush image and then select drone roll UI, which is what it's called. You'll notice it's not the correct size, so you're going to go ahead and click size to content, which will make it size to 1920 by 1080. And then once we're in here, we're going to mess around with it a little bit. We don't need to align it to anything. We don't have to change the size, but we're going to anchor it to the center of the screen now, and then reset its positions. And we'll have to align it now by 0.5 by 0.5, which will center it again. And then that should be everything. Okay, so once we've got all of that, we're going to go ahead and come into our graph. Now, we don't need to make a binding for this. And then once we're in our graph, we're going to make an event. Oh, wait up. We're not in our event graph just yet. We're going to come into our event graph. We're going to delete these ones, and then we'll make an event tick. And then from that event tick, we're going to get our image. But first, I'm going to rename it. So we'll call it drone crosshair. And once you've called it that, you go back into your graph, and then we'll find it under our variables. Drag that out. We'll go get. We'll drag out again and go set render transform angle. And we'll connect that to our event tick. And then just neaten it up a little bit. And then once you've got that, we then need to get the angle that it's going to rotate at. Okay, sorry about that cut. I'm going to go ahead and go back into my drone HUD. Now, I had an issue with getting this set up. For some reason, I couldn't set up the way that I've previously done it, so I've had to change a little bit, which is why I skipped ahead and I've got everything done. So, we'll go ahead and we'll get our stuff set up. So you can see, I've gone from my event tick, and then I cast to the BP drone, and then we've gotten player pawn as a reference, and then we then drag out from as BP drone, and we get our right current. Our right current is the variable we made earlier under our BP drone. We then times that by 10, because right current will be a decimal number between -1 and 0, and 0 and +1, so we then have to times that by 5, so it's actually big enough of an angle that we'll notice it. We then put that into our render transform, and then you notice now that when we press play, we'll come on in and we can move around and it'll slide side to side. Notice it's actually rotating too, it's not just the screen moving the HUD. The HUD itself does actually rotate, which is a really nice effect. It adds to the roll and makes it just look that little bit more crisp. Now, if you want to make it roll even more, you'll notice here that I've changed it to 50. And I can come in and roll an insane amount, but that's just a little over the top. You know, just a little. But, we'll go ahead and we'll change that. Now, if you don't like how far it rolls, you can decrease that number, but I find 10 is a pretty good number. Anyway, guys, that's it for this tutorial. If you enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content. If you want to see videos similar to this, leave a comment down below letting me know on different game mechanics you want to see. In the next episode, we're going to be setting up the rest of the mechanics. Currently, we have it so you can fly around and it rolls, and the UI rolls with it. We've got the rangefinder, we've got night vision, we've got all of that working. But we still got a lot of different mechanics to add, so if you want to see the rest of the tutorial, continue to follow it. There'll be a link in the description or at the end page if it's already uploaded. Anyway, that's all for this episode. See you guys!